If people don't feel like they belong in a place, if they don't see themselves as part of the community, then first of all, you're not going to make those KPIs and you're not going to get
Right.
those. But also, it's so important. And sometimes that changes the trajectory of other people.
Hi, it's me, your teacher turned CTIO friend, Diane Dersch, and this is Beneath the Water.
Hi there. I'm with one of my dearest friends, Marlo Gaddis. We met at some COSN years ago.
Yeah.
And I think we were both working on our CETL.
We were.
And I didn't even know you, really. But we met that's the year that they had the campfires.
Yep. We sat at the campfire across from each other. Yeah, absolutely.
And you said to me, I know about you or something, but we're both studying for our CETL, and we talked a bit. But what I remembered was the warmth that you had and how inviting you were. It was almost like an immediate safe space. It's hard to explain, just when you pick up vibes from people. And it was a short chance meeting, but then I think as time went on, we ended up on the COSM board together.
We did, yeah.
You passed the CETL exam first time. I did not. I do recall that because my father had leukemia, and one of my friends said, just take the test. You don't have to study. Well, I did need to study, so I passed. Or I did not pass the first year.
Yes, but you did pass the second time.
I did pass the second time. But then when we served on the COSM board, I think that is really when we became so close because you and I think, both have a passion for inclusion.
We do.
And making sure that others are involved. And I picked up on that the first time I met you, and I've picked up on it ever since. And we worked together then in the diversity, equity, inclusion, strategic plans, had that included, and really did a lot together. I'm really proud of the Women in Technology
we started
event.
it all.
Yep, that started at COSN, and I absolutely love that now we're seeing it in other places.
Yes.
So, Marlo, you're just one of my dearest lifelong friends.
Back at
and
you,
I
friend.
love you. I love you to pieces. I learned so much from you as well. I recall one time I was introducing something, and you're like, Diane, you missed this part. When you say this, you maybe aren't including this group of people. And so have you thought about it this way or that way? And so I've learned that from you, to always look at a situation and think about, am I including the people
who's not included? Yeah.
Yep, be included. And so I've carried that on in my Women in Technology things, and I've had that conversation with some of my colleagues. Are we missing some people here who should be here, and how do we invite them in? So I give you credit for that. And I actually had someone in Women in Technology email me and say, thank you for bringing that part up, because that's not something I was looking at, and now I am. So now it's gotten paid forward.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely.
So that's my Marlo meeting.
Yep. It's funny. I almost can't remember a time when you were not a part of my career and my life, right? So I think the amount of times we as women in tech are by ourselves, right?
So often.
Often. And then we're in rooms where it just seems often that we are kind of in an echo chamber, that no one's really listening, that we're doing that. And the great thing is, even from that first time at the campfire, and I think it's really amusing that we both absolutely remember the first time we met.
Yes.
Because I remember thinking, you have this energy. Like, you exude energy and enthusiasm. And I remember thinking, like, God, how do I become this woman? She is like all powerful, all amazing, all in one big package. In fact, even my husband, before he ever met you, knew who you were, not just from me talking, but even, following you on social media and things like that. So
sure.
I think you bring a very bright spirit to a lot of the things that people don't see. But I always appreciate the fact that no matter what, when I feel alone or afraid, I can look across the room and I can see you, and I know I'm okay. And I think that is something that is a gift.
Wow. Well, and again, back at you, right? I do feel that we kind of grew up together.
Very true.
In the EdTech leadership space, right? Because you, in a much larger school district you were in, but just some of the common challenges and things. And yeah, I mean, again, in text messaging, how we just kind of send stuff back and forth and share information and all those things. You're right. It's like I can't imagine being an EdTech leader without Marlo Gaddis.
Yes.
As part of it. So, I mean, I guess you are all learning about the whole Marlo-Diane connection because it's pretty tight.
Yeah. It is absolutely that way.
Well, and this podcast, Beneath the Water, talks about leadership because we've got aspirational leaders out there or current leaders who are saying, I want to up my game. And so, like, what is the secret behind or beneath the water, right? And so that's why I've been going kind of deep into, leadership and what has caused you to be the leader that you are. It's interesting because I think of you as always creating that safe space. And so when we did our Women in Technology events, we've done this for many years now. And I always feel safe when you're in the room because, number one, you're an ultimate planner. So when we have to show up at 7:30.
Yes, and OCD. Yes, they may say that.
When we have to show up at 7:30, and we all say that she shows up at 7 to have everything ready. But you've always created that space. And this last year, I talked about something in front of hundreds of women I had never talked about before, which is the fact that I was a mother when I was 16. And I know you, in car rides together where you and I had spent time together, you said, Diane, you need to talk about that. Because I think I always thought, I don't want to be, that's the girl who was 16 years old, made it through high school, and then, went on to have this career. I wanted to be known for the stuff I did. But with your encouragement, I brought that up.
And how many people came up to you afterwards thanking you for telling the story?
Yes. So again, that was the encouragement that I would not have done that on my own. And you helped me do that. And because of that, and because of my past, I think I've always had this inclusive part of me. There are underrepresented populations. I had many, many opinions created about me before I could get in front of that and say, hey, wait, I am a good student. And hey, wait, I can finish high school.
Right.
And can have a career. And so I, throughout my career, wanted to make sure that we empowered others so that even if they were, behind the 8 ball, that they had ways to succeed. And so that's kind of my beneath the water. Did you have anything like that in your past?
I think there's a lot of things in my past that probably have been beneath the water and probably a lot of things that people don't know. Because I think one of the things we do as women is that we see successful women and we think that their path was easy, right?
True.
We think that, if I only had this job or if I only did this or I only had the perfect family or that, like that those people in leadership haven't had to sacrifice or haven't had to go through some trauma of their own, right? I joke sometimes that my closest friends were all trauma bonded, right? Because we've all gone through things.
Yeah.
So I think... So I know this would be surprising to anybody who knows me, but I was very much a wallflower growing up. I was a very quiet, compliant kid. Always wanted to be a teacher. I could be bossy, but in general, I was mostly a compliant, quiet kid. I dealt with weight issues my whole life, and those of you who've known me have seen me, highs and lows of that. And so I was bullied a lot as a kid. And everything from when I was in second grade, I was beat up by two boys at the bus stop with hockey sticks and had to crawl home to my dad and my mom. Several years later, I was trying to deliver Girl Scout cookies, which you want to say is kind of sounds funny, but was held at knife point by a kid wanting all my money. And then I also, in that same 5-year span, had my best friend was murdered by a local kid. So we all have our traumas, right, that cause us to behave and feel certain ways.
Right.
And so because of all these things, I stayed in the background because if I was in the background, nobody could pick on me. Nobody would bully me. Like if nobody noticed me, then I could stay quiet, right? And I think it wasn't until I was an adult, right? And I was in a leadership role at that point in time when I was being bullied by my boss. And I had had enough of being bullied. I stood up for myself for the first time in my life, I would say, probably. And it was the first time I found my voice. There were times when I wish I hadn't done what I did, but I did regardless. But then I ended up going to work for another woman who, and my previous boss was also female. But I went to work for another woman who reevaluated and helped me understand that I had value. And so she really taught me how to lead and lead with authority and lead with confidence. And so I think that for me was kind of when I first realized that what I had to say mattered.
Right.
And it was okay if people didn't like it. It was okay. But it kind of opened up kind of a beast inside to say, to your point, I feel like every time I talk, I feel like I am defending or supporting somebody else who is less than or feels less than. And I think that's kind of comes back to my background of that.
Sure. And yeah, like you said, just kind of trying to be not noticed,
right,
so that you wouldn't get picked on and bullied. Was there that voice inside of you that always wanted to come out, but just you felt it couldn't because you didn't want to be noticed?
I don't know that it ever existed because I was scared all the time, right? I don't know. And I don't know that I knew I was scared then.
Sure.
Right? Someone once asked me, name a time when you felt, carefree, not anxious, not scared. And it's really funny. And if my parents were listening to this, which I know my mother will because that's just who she is. But there's a picture of my sister and I in bathing suits and bikes on a driveway. And for some reason, that is the image I have in my head every time I think about that. I don't remember the day, but I remember the look on my face and I remember the smile and that I was with my sister who is, just phenomenal and is, one of my best friends. Yes, she's awesome. But I think, I don't know that I ever had someone dying to come out. I just know I was, and I don't know that I would have called it fear at the time, but I just knew that it didn't matter.
Wow. And, you bring up a really good point that we live this stuff and we don't know, right? We don't know until we get to be this age, maybe, and do some reflection and can finally put some words to those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the more I learn about myself as a leader, the more I understand why I do the things I do and how I do the things I do. And sometimes it's how to fix the things I do. But yes, all of the above.
Well, and, I think about this and your leadership, and I've seen it in action. I've seen you speak up. I've seen you, operationalize things. I've seen you get stuff that's off the train tracks back on again. What now that, we're seasoned, what would you like people to remember or know about Marlo Gaddis and her leadership?
You know, I want people to understand that culture matters.
Yes.
That it doesn't matter if you are the most high performing team. It doesn't matter if your KPIs or your outcomes are all perfect. If people don't feel like they belong in a place, if they don't see themselves as part of the community, then first of all, you're not going to make those KPIs and you're not going to get
Right.
those. But also, it's so important. And sometimes that changes the trajectory of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope and I know that in some ways, my leadership has helped some people. I won't say it's helped all people, but as far as I'm concerned, that's the way I try to lead. It's the leader I needed. People always say you should be the leader that you needed when you didn't have a leader or when you were having a not great leader. But I think that's the key, and that's try to how I parented. Though we all make mistakes in parenting, that's just part of it. But I think in many ways it's just a matter of trying to be the person I needed. Is how I lead.
And we find out that not just the person you needed, but many people need, that kind of leader. Okay, now we're going to talk about the northern pike moment, I call it. When you're a fisher person, if you get a northern pike, they're slimy, you've got hooks flying everywhere, and you have to modify whatever you're doing because many things can go wrong. In my leadership, at one time in a district I was at, we had a flat structure, 40 people, all answering to one person, me, the CTIO. And so I needed to put like some middle management in there. So, of course, when you're new, you study, you take a look at, you think about the people and all those things. And then you build what you think is your new structure, right? After that, you bounce it off other leaders, see what they think. And then you have those conversations with the people who are moving on that org chart. I thought I had done that because, when I moved on an org chart, that was modeled to me by the superintendent I had, how she came and we had that conversation, talked about why I was moving on the org chart and all those things. Thought I had those conversations. Then we had a staff meeting where I presented the org chart and I, acknowledged the people who, might be in some of these other positions, but I look out into the audience and I forgot one person who just learned at that meeting, right, that she was in a different position on the org chart. I felt horrible. And believe me,
that internal guilt. Yeah.
Yes, because it's like that's a problem I will never let happen again, right? Because the empathy inside me, it's like just the look on her face. And so I talked to her immediately right after the meeting, and I apologized, first of all, because I felt that was very important. I needed to apologize. It was 100% on me. But then I did ask her, what can I do to make this better? I don't think she had an answer at that moment, but I felt it was important, for her to see that I truly was sorry for what I did. By the time I was done with that district, we were on great terms. In fact, she never even held it over my head or anything of the sort, and I loved her like I loved all the other people in my department. But that was, for me, a Northern Pike moment because I thought if I were her, I would have felt horrible and wanted to crawl under the table. And so I definitely did need to humble myself in front of her and of my whole department, really, and apologize and say, I will work to never let this happen again. So anything like that in your leadership where you had to learn a lesson, maybe the hard way?
I think I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I think maybe my son gets that from me is the idea that I have to always learn things the hard way. But I want to go back to a time before the boss incident when I was where I didn't have my voice still. And I was working as a math and science lead teacher in a district. And I worked for a wonderful leader. Her name was Dr. Rhonda Truitt. She was an amazing mentor and great educator. And so she is a Saponi Indian, Saponi Nation. She's part of that tribe. And so two things I learned from her. One, every detail matters. And two, so does representation. And so I think at that point in time, I was still living in my privilege, right, as a white woman, and not understanding some of the choices and some of the language that we use, and how, when we say words, how they matter to others. And so at some point in time, we were talking about some issues. First of all, she would redline everything I gave her. Like, it was like going through English. Like, she would redline everything and make sure, like, everything was perfect. That's where I get my attention to detail from, is her. Like, because small things matter.
Sure.
It shows that you care. And so her wanting me to make sure that I made everything the way they needed to be. But the big lesson I have is one day, and I'm going to ask forgiveness from your audience for when I say what I'm getting ready to say, and just know that the lesson was learned. But at some point in time, we were talking about working with schools, and we were talking about leadership, and I made the statement, there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And she got very quiet. And then she kindly explained to me how that was an inappropriate statement. That there are lots of other idioms, if I wanted to use, that I could have used. Cooks in the kitchen, lots of different ways that we do that. But we don't use cultural references in language because that matters.
Right.
And so she's also the same person that when we would get documents or when we were looking at curriculum materials, she was the one that reminded me to look to see who was there and who was not there.
In
right?
pictures and in
pictures
language.
and in everything. So, if you've been with me anywhere, you'll know that quite often I'll be in a room and I'll be like, "Where's the diversity? Who's not here? Like, there's not enough women, or there's not enough people of color, women of color." So we look at those types of things. But Dr. Truitt was the one who really gave me two great lessons that have really helped pull me through and have shaped me to be the person in that aspect. Because small things do matter. And we may think they're small, but they're not small to others.
Right. Really good point. About, first of all, the care that she took to read through all the things that you had created, and probably everyone she supervised, but that part about your work matters. And so I'm going to put the time and effort into helping you make the best it can be.
And it wasn't just one revision. She would hit it 2 or 3 times. So it was like English class, but she is right.
Yes. And yeah, that part about, because I think everyone can say they're guilty of somehow using, language in the wrong way. I just think of all the technology words even, right? That when we talk about plugs and when we talk about
male and female and the blacklist and the whitelist and all things that we could change. Even the word stakeholders is
exactly.
not appropriate. So thinking about how words matter and how we choose our words, sometimes it's best to pause before you open your mouth, which is not a skill set that I've had many times, but pausing and thinking through some of our language really does make a difference.
Yeah, I agree, because even things, where was I? And I had to think about how I was going to help correct it. When someone said, "I really got gypped in that deal." It's like, okay, wait, do you realize? Because sometimes they don't even realize, that they're talking about a group of people.
Right.
And so bringing that forward in a friendly way. I've always, and I learned from you, I've always liked your approach of, do you mind if I give you some feedback? And I think that's a really good opening line because it prepares people for, okay, I might hear something that I don't want to hear, but it's going to be for my good. And so, and I've seen you do that. You've done it to me. And I've always
appreciated. And I hope others would do it to me as well,
yes,
because I would much rather know if there's something I can be doing better. I am very much driven by feedback.
Right. And the words, I mean, as you said, they matter. And so us in the technology world, we've got our crazy words, and there are acronyms and everything else. And I think, and I've seen lists that have alternatives to, instead of saying this, you could say that. So that's something we should definitely pay more attention to as we move forward. So I appreciate the things that you got from your mentor, I would say, because, again, she has passed on through you, things that go on down the line, and that's exactly what we're hoping to do here. What words of advice might you have for maybe aspirational leaders, maybe people in the classroom who are leaders, but who want to up their leadership game?
I think there's several things that I would recommend to leaders. And when we talk about this, I'm talking about women, men, all types of leaders. And that is find a mentor or mentors. Find the people that you want to emulate. Don't put them on a pedestal. The thing that drives me crazy more than anything is when someone says the Marlo Gaddis, and I'm like, I am not the Marlo Gaddis. I may be.
Did I say that? I may have said that.
No, you don't. I might be the Marlo Gaddis, but don't call me the. Like, I'm not the Ohio State, right? I'm just Marlo Gaddis. But I think you find the people you want to emulate, right? And then you ask them, just go up to them and say, hey, I would love to learn from you. And figure that out in one way or another. Like, we talk about that all the time at the women's event at COSIN, is like, we all put our pants or our dresses on one, however we do it. But we're all the same. And so don't put people on pedestals. They will fail you. Right? They will fail you if they're on pedestals.
All human.
But also figure out where your voice lies, right? So your voice matters. And sometimes we're not brave enough, as I wasn't for a large portion of my life. I mean, I was in my 40s when my voice finally came out. Don't wait as long as I did to do that, because your opinion, your voice, your ideas, you matter. And so I think that's the one thing that I tell people all the time, is that you can't oversell you can undersell, but you can't oversell the worth that you have. And so find the right people to connect with, find your people, and then learn, and make sure you learn, and get feedback. Be willing to take the feedback, because it only makes us better.
Yeah, this is true. And again, we have been part of a community for a long time and rely on each other for those things. And it's true that we want others to feel, that kind of community as well, and that value, because, like you said, everyone is worthy to contribute to this world. So thank you so much for your words of wisdom and just being my friend and having this great discussion.
I love you, and I love I love the daughter that's behind the camera too. So I love your family. And if you don't know Diane well, do take a moment to hear her story. It's so much more than people know, and she has inspired me and lots of other people. So I'm very thankful to be here with you.
Thank you. And again, this is Marlo being Marlo. She lifts others up, and I appreciate that. You've helped me become the person I am, and I'm grateful.
Yep. Thanks.
So thank you for joining Beneath the Water. This has been Beneath the Water podcast, hosted by me, Diane Dersch.
Deanna Dersch is executive producer, creative director, and editor. Brock Mende is our audio engineer and sound designer. Special thanks to Friends of Friends Recording in Chicago, Illinois. The link to the community can be found at the description below. Also, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review because those reviews go a long way in helping us reach the people who will find a home here. Thanks for joining.